80 is the legalization of growing of marijuana and hemp. And to give you guys a little bit of background, so I'm all about stimulating the economy and doing what we can to build jobs in this, and I'm from an agricultural background, okay? So when I looked at this, quite frankly, I wanted it to work. I wanted to find a way to stimulate the economy and wanted to do that. But as I read it, it became more and more apparent of what it was truly trying to do. And here's the first indication. So in the beginning of it, if you read the full measure, there's about a page and a half that's dedicated to talking about all of the great benefits of hemp. And hemp is the part of the plant that doesn't have the cannabinoids, the actual toxin that you know of as marijuana or people hear about that they smoke, right? So hemp is the there is no cannabinoids in it. So they talk about it for a page and a half, which means nothing because it's all whereases. When you get to the substance of what they actually changed the law, it never addresses hemp. It only addresses the cannabis, the actual smoking toxin type product. And the first thing as a free market person that I looked at is it says anybody who is a retail grower receives only 15% of the retail sales. 85% goes to the state. Okay, so first that sends red flags. I'm a free market person. Why in the world would I look at trying to create a free market and a new enterprise in this state? And yet the state controls 85% of it. It's called the Alcohol Board Board. Have we all seen that before? So there were some red flags. Oh, the first thing I forgot to tell you is no matter what we do, it's illegal. The federal government has declared it's illegal. So even if we pass this is illegally federally.
85% of what?
85% of all proceeds of the sale of cannabis.
Okay, that's revenue. You're not talking about
All revenues. All revenues. It's not even, they don't even care how much it costs you to grow it. They take 85% straight off the top to the government. 15%. So that makes me go, okay, if I'm an agriculture person, because the first thing I do is put a pencil, how do I justify the expense of growing this for such a little bit of profit? That's the first red flag that you should think about. Because I'm like, just as a free market, it doesn't. How do I ever make it pencil to do this? After looking through this a lot, what it ends up really doing, in my personal opinion, and this is what my personal opinion, is it gives great cover to a black market. So you're still going to see huge black market of cannabis happen, and all they're going to do is when they get caught, they're going to run over here and go, wait, I was doing it legally. But the reality is they're not going to run it through the state store. The state store is going to take 85%. They're going to sell it in the black market until they get caught, and then they're going to run over to the state sales part and say, oh wait, no, I fall under this, I was legally growing it. It's simply a cover for a black market industry that is not going to come to the surface. That's my opinion. Here's the other thing that really, really concerned me. There is a fiscal impact done by our budget office as well, and it tells you how much the money's going to come in and how much money they expect to go out. So they think that this will actually be a $23 million positive to the state. That's pretty good. We could all use $23 million in the state coffers, right? What was interesting, though, is that it would save $2.3 million in convictions of all those illegal folks that no longer will be illegal. But it will cost our judicial system alone $3.3 million in redaction. Because what they did is they said, no citizen has the right to know who's actually growing pot or cannabis. And the government has to do everything in their power to obscure the identity of any legal grower. So why would you obscure a legal grower if they were legal and they were doing things up front? So in fact, the court is going to take a $3.3 million hit and simply blacking out people's names as things get prosecuted. So there were so many red flags as I came up, and I believe in transparency. If you're going to have a government-run program, it needs to be as transparent as possible. This does the exact opposite. It completely obscures the government process and the people involved in that process. So in my personal opinion, this is not a make it a positive for the economy, and I just couldn't get there. There were too many other bad things in it. Any questions? Confuse you all. I spent way too much time on pot growth.
Is a no vote no?
A no vote will not make it legal, which it wouldn't be legal in the federal eyes anyway, but yes, I would suggest a no vote.
Did they give any reason why they don't want anybody to know that they're growing something that's supposed to be illegal?
Not that I can see, but I can tell you from past experience, because I have a history of how my mom is still in California. And I grew up in a little tiny town called Bryant, California, where we had literally less than 500 people, and they tried to make selling of pot legal. And we actually, in that little tiny town, had 4 smoke head shops, pot shops, that popped up. What we found in that Fresno area is the reason that you don't want anybody to know is because they know when your plant gets 6 to 7 foot high, it's ready for harvest, and they come in and they steal it. And there was a high crime rate that started to really grow for guys that were growing it in their backyard. People figured out, and they would come in and confiscate it and take it back into the black market. So I have a feeling it was probably something to try to hide addresses and where that was being grown to keep that from happening.
Well, wouldn't that also asymptote to the cost of the whole thing anyway? Because now they're going to be out chasing people who are out chasing people.
Yes, it is a perverse thing. Yes. Yeah, exactly. But that's the best thing I can think of is that, giving them the benefit of the doubt, they probably just didn't want people to know where you could go and steal their crop from. But the reality is it is very, unless you're growing it in a house under lights, it's a very obvious crop. So it's not like you're going to hide it in your backyard because the plant actually gets higher than most fences. So, I don't know. That's the best guess I can have on that one. So Major 81 is the next one. This is a ban on gill netter fishermen on the main stem of the Columbia River. So the best way I can explain this one, and again, this is a Karla's personal opinion because I have some natural resource background, is that this is one set of fishermen against another set of fishermen. The sports fishermen are trying to shut down the commercial gill netters so that they can have a higher allocation of the salmon as sport fishing salmon rather than gill net fishing salmon. Now here's my opinion. Gill nets are non-selective. I fully agree with that. But the reality is that they are probably the heaviestly regulated part of the fishing industry that I know of in the state of Oregon. They're highly regulated. 200 permits are given a year to gill netters, and those gill netters don't just go and drop their net and walk away. They are given specific days of which they are allowed to put their nets in the river and specific times of which they have to pull them out. They're incredibly heavily regulated. Part of the reason is they are non-selective, and so you catch every type of fish. So what they do is when they allow a gill netter to set a net, it's when they know it's actually a hatchery run. So they're not going to be allowed to set a net when that run's half and it's not clearly all hatchery yet. They only are allowed to set their net into that Columbia River when they know that, hey, this is a full hatchery run right now. And that's how they do it. So that, in my opinion, that's what they do. The argument says, oh, that you can change the equipment to seam nets, which are a little more selective. They're still nets, but they're a little more selective. When you look at the statements, it's about $150,000 equipment change for those gill netters. Now, they're not making a whole lot of money, and I will tell you that that type of capital investment would take a long time for them to get returned. The reality is this is kind of a moot point because the governor has decided to essentially put them to a halt by executive order. About 2 weeks ago, the governor said there will be, and I haven't read his exact order, but essentially he's moved all gill nets two tributaries to the Columbia River, so off the main stem. Now recognize this and what the governor did only impacts Oregon fishermen. It does not impact tribal fishermen who also use gill nets, nor does it affect Washington fishermen that also fish the main stem of the Columbia with gill nets. So we were strictly attacking our own, not Washington and not tribal.
What's the difference between those two kinds of nets?
You know what? I don't know for sure, but I know that there is the mesh size is different, but I think there is even, I think they're smaller in width, so the breadth of what they're catching, the width of what they're catching is smaller, but there's some other things that make them, I think they're also able to release out of those nets a little easier with not so much high, or such high mortality that you can actually release the fish and still not, likely not kill them, but I mean, if you know anything about fishing, just simply touching the fish takes off half their immune system, so it's to that discretion.